Hello and welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Mohammed Saleh, and let's get the show rolling. Now, there is never a dull day in Pakistani politics, and make no mistake, the scenes of violence and arson that are playing out in the streets of Pakistan at this moment are not that of a spontaneous protest. What you're witnessing is an engineered protest, but this is not even a protest actually. This is a pretext for what is to come next. Because the real power that is pulling the strings that has led to the arrest of Imran Khan is the holy calf of Pakistan. We're talking about the Pakistani army, which appears to be on the move again for a possible coup. The battle lines are clearly drawn. The Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf supporters are targeting the military establishment, but what is also clear is that no leader in Pakistan's history who has taken on the Pakistani army has managed to survive politically in the country. This is our cover story tonight, and we'll be taking a look as to what has happened in the case of Imran Khan and as to why it is going to be difficult for Imran Khan to wriggle himself out of this crisis. And also on the show tonight, we'll tell you why the COVID-19 pandemic, which the WHO recently had termed as no longer a public health emergency of international concern, is not going away anytime soon. So just when you thought that the pandemic is over, China, the epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic, is again witnessing a surge in the number of infections. Now, after sparking a bruising war in Ukraine that has dragged on for 15 long months, but trying to expand the frontiers of the NATO military alliance ever closer to the borders of Russia, the question is this: is the United States now again expanding the North Atlantic Treaty Alliance into the Pacific Ocean? Because according to reports, NATO at this moment is in talks to open a liaison office in Japan, the very first of its kind in Asia. And what job does the NATO military alliance have in Japan? It's just 4 more days for the big elections in Turkey, as Recep Tayyip Erdogan is facing the biggest test of his political career at the ballot box. After having dominated Turkey's politics for well over 2 decades, the economy in Turkey at this moment is in pretty poor shape. The deadly earthquake has soured the mood for the Turkish public, and we'll tell you why Erdogan is facing the biggest test of his political career yet. And also on the show, we'll be telling you as to why having a Netflix account in the United Kingdom could potentially boost your credit worthiness. You heard that right. Having these subscription services such as Netflix or Spotify or Amazon Prime, according to this rating agency, proves that you're actually someone who's credit worthy and can make steady payments and therefore deserve a better credit rating score. So how far do you agree with this logic, or is this just a marketing gimmick? We'll be getting you all of these details, but first, the big story, of course, is from Pakistan. So it's been 20 hours since the arrest of Imran Khan. His political enemies, led by Pakistan's powerful generals, believe that they've found the former Prime Minister's weak spot. It is a corruption case that involves his third wife, Bushra Baby. The corruption that was abetted by Imran Khan when he was the Prime Minister of Pakistan. We're talking about the Tosha Khana case, in which precious state gifts to Imran Khan were purchased at dirt cheap prices from the treasury by Imran Khan and then were sold for a fabulous profit. But the question is, who were they sold to? To foreign businessmen through his wife Bushra Bibi's contacts like Farah Khan. Now, these gifts included stuff such as the Rolex watches, gold rings and gold-plated pens. What is interesting is this. A court has now upheld all of these charges and has indicted the former Pakistani Prime Minister. So what does this indictment mean? In 2 words, it means double trouble for Imran Khan. He's already behind bars in one case and now he's been accused in another. And this could, of course, extend his time in prison. So how is Imran Khan taking this? Well, his reply is coming from his supporters on the streets. His supporters are running riot. They're indulging in violence and vandalism. Women too are out in droves to protest against the arrest of their hero. In response, internet services have been suspended in large parts across Pakistan to cut off communication lines between his supporters. The schools are shut at this moment as we speak, and Western nations have told their citizens to cancel their scheduled visits to Pakistan. Now, these are all the developments from just the last 20 odd hours. 20 hours of disruption and madness. Remember, Pakistan should have been gearing up for elections in the Punjab province this week, but that is not what is happening. What is happening is that Imran Khan has been arrested. And now the question is, who is driving these protests and who is to be blamed for all of this? The answer depends on who you ask. The Pakistani establishment is blaming Imran Khan's party members. It has accused them of deliberately pushing the country into the arms of anarchy. The Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf has blamed the Pakistani government and, more importantly, it has squarely blamed the Pakistani army. And it has accused them of conspiring to end the political career of their leader and hero Imran Khan. So who is speaking the truth at this moment in Pakistan? Is Imran Khan's arrest really an outcome of his battle with the Sharifs and Pakistan's holy calf, its army, or is this based on credible evidence in cases of money laundering that he presently faces? Now, the answer, to be fair, is a mix of both. We'll tell you how in just a bit. But first, let's take you through as to what's been happening on the ground. Let's start from Islamabad. This morning, Imran Khan was produced at the special court that is set up in the headquarters of the Islamabad police. It heard the arguments of the National Accountability Bureau and its demand to keep the PTR chief in physical remand for the next 14 days. The last we checked, the court had reserved its verdict. His party is gripped by a sense of impending doom. It has mobilized its workers across the country and it has asked them to stage a dharna until he is released. Now look at these images. Now these images are from Faizabad. Now, these are PTI workers who are staging a demonstration. They're raising slogans against the current dispensation. And similar such protests have been staged in other cities such as Karachi, Lahore, Peshawar, just to name a few. But the protest that stands out the most is one from Lahore on Tuesday evening. Now, we told it to you on the show last night as to how the PTI supporters stormed the house of Lahore Corps Commander. And guess what? They did not leave the house empty-handed. So when the protesters entered into the house of the Corps Commander in Lahore, this is what they took from his house. Look at this video. This is a PTI worker with a peacock in his arms, and he said that he stole it from the Corps Commander's house. He in fact went on to make the argument that he did not even steal the bird. He actually took the bird that had been purchased from people's money, and therefore his act of taking the peacock away from the Corps Commander's house should not be taken as stealing. Listen in. So what did he do with the peacock? Perhaps made a sumptuous meal out for dinner. And by the way, peacocks were not the only thing that was stolen last evening. There was also, believe it or not, chicken korma that was taken out from the fridge. Coca-Cola, onions, frozen strawberries and also small tubs of curd. All of these were taken away from the Corps Commander's home. The video of the loot has now gone viral.
ये क्या है? आप उनका कोरमा ले आए? आंटी आप क्या लेके जा रही हैं? नूडल्स? सैलड लेके जा रही हैं? ये क्या लेके जा रहे हो? क्या डाल रहे हो? टमाटो केचप? ये क्या है? भाई ये कहाँ से लिया? ये क्या है? ये क्या है?
Now, in other parts of the country, the protesters were not that lucky for a sumptuous meal. Now take the Punjab province for instance. Now, since last evening, over 1,000 protesters have been reportedly arrested on charges of vandalism, arson and clashing with the police officials. To prevent the situation from escalating further, internet services have been suspended in several parts of Pakistan. This decision was taken by the Pakistani Telecommunications Authority, and it has said that the services will remain shut for an indefinite period of time. Now, too bad the decision, of course, has fallen flat. The protesters remain on the streets, they're vandalizing public property, and they're also setting fire to government institutions. Now, look at the visuals that will come up on your screens. This morning, the office of Radio Pakistan in Peshawar was set ablaze. Reports say that the protesters also attacked the offices of the Associated Press of Pakistan. What's worse, and also what's obvious, is that it is having a direct impact on the country's economy. The currency is slumped to a record low. Just hours after the unrest began, the currency fell by nearly about 1.3%, and it now stands at 288 Pakistani rupees for a single American dollar. The reports say that Pakistan's international bonds have also gone down lower by about 0.4 cents. So the economy is tanking, the unrest is spreading, and the world, of course, is watching. In the last 24 hours, several Western nations have reacted to what has unfolded in Pakistan. The United Kingdom's Foreign Secretary has asked Pakistan to adhere to the rule of law. The American Secretary of State has asked Islamabad to adhere to the Constitution. But the thing is this: how can the Pakistani government follow its Constitution when it is the army that is calling the shots on the ground? Now, this is the same army that has its footprints in the drama that is at this moment unfolding in the country. You see, the arrest of Imran Khan could not have taken place without the nod of the military generals. And what makes it even more obvious is the fact that the arrest was carried out by a paramilitary force and not the Pakistani police, which is why even the protesters are not attacking the Pakistani police, but they're attacking the army installations in the country. My point is simple. What we are witnessing at this moment is almost unprecedented. This is a battle between Imran Khan and the all-powerful Pakistani military in the country. And this is not a question of if, but when, because for the last 12-odd months, Imran Khan has consistently leveled one allegation after another against the Pakistani army. In June 2022, he indirectly accused the army of blackmailing him and of tying his hands on the most pressing foreign policy issues. In August 2022, he'd mocked the army generals and had called them as neutrals, and it added that history will remember what they did to the country. In November 2022, he in fact took things a notch higher. He directly named a military general for planning to assassinate him. He said that Major General Faisal Nasir had conspired with the country's interior minister to get him killed. On the 9th of January in 2023, he asked the army to refrain from political engineering in the elections, and he also blamed the former army chief, General Qamar Javed Bajwa, for the current political crisis that Pakistan finds itself in. Again in February, he sought an internal military inquiry against Bajwa for his alleged admission that he had toppled his government. Now, these are just a few of his statements against the army. There are many more attacks and many more accusations. They all seem to have culminated into his arrest, because in Pakistan, make no mistake about this, no one can make allegations and attack the Pakistani army and get away with it, no matter how much public sympathy you attract, and no matter even if you are a cricketing god who turned into a prime minister in Pakistan. From Pakistan, let's now shift our attention to Nepal, and this is being dubbed as a one-of-a-kind scam that you'd have heard. The immigration scams are aplenty, and Nepal at this moment finds itself in an immigration scam unlike any other. Nepal is in the headlines for an alleged Bhutanese refugee scam, a scam which could give a sort of a jackpot chance to migrate to the United States of America. This has resulted in the arrest of Nepal's former Home Minister, Balkrishna Khand. So what is this scam all about? We'll give you the details in a bit, but first, let's give you the context. You see, the United States has always been a bit of a big relief to Nepal. It has accepted thousands of Bhutanese from inside of Nepal's borders. Now, these are Bhutanese who took shelter in Nepal since the 1990s. It turns out that some in Nepal tried to take advantage of the US help to the Bhutanese. Reports say the top Nepalese officials got involved in this scam, which had led their citizens to illegally enter into the United States. Now, these Nepalese officials apparently hatched a scam to traffic Nepalese nationals disguised as Bhutanese refugees. And this has now led to several high-profile arrests. Officials who have taken huge sums of money from their citizens to send them to the United States are now behind bars in Nepal. The police has initiated an extensive investigation. Many have been arrested. Take, for example, the former Home Secretary, Tek Narayan Pandey, the security advisor to the former Home Minister, Indrajit Rai, and also the former Home Minister, Balakrishna Khand. All of them are now behind bars. An arrest warrant has also been issued against the CPN-UML Secretary and former Deputy Prime Minister Bahadur Rayamaji, who is now absconding, and his son has been detained along with 6 others who are said to be involved in this racket. The police say that all of them were involved in forging documents for the fake Bhutanese refugees. Nepalese politics is being jolted by these revelations. The parliament's budget session was disrupted by opposition parties who demanded for an immediate debate on the refugee scam. The House of Representatives also witnessed a lot of chaos. A lawmaker decided to take off his shirt in the House when he was not allowed to speak. The politician demanded a deeper probe into the controversial scam. There are audio recordings that are also trickling in day by day, recordings of conversations between the alleged politicians and the bureaucrats. Investigators are verifying the recordings that are now going viral on the internet. Officials say that more arrests are likely to be done depending on the recordings. The refugee scam has a history. Last year, the police found a group which was offering to send the Nepalese citizens to the United States. The strategy was the same, masking the Nepalese nationals as Bhutanese refugees and then sending them abroad. The criminal group had allegedly swindled 875 people of millions of dollars. Now, these were criminals with strong political connections. The police also has arrested several of the group members after the victims filed a case against the group. Top Nepalese officials are worried that the incident has in fact eroded Nepal's international image. Questions are being raised on national security, the credibility of Nepal's political system, and also any commitment the country might in fact make in the future. Will this scam also harm Nepal's relations with its neighbors? Now the political leadership of the Home Ministry has been exposed. Experts say that Nepal now has a bigger challenge ahead, the task of assuaging the concerns of countries such as India and China, because remember, it is nothing less than the Home Minister, the former Home Minister of Nepal, who is now said to be involved. Let's now shift our attention to what is happening in Europe, where European capitals appear to be going after Vladimir Putin's chef. This man that you see on your screens, Yevgeny Prigozhin, you may know him as the leader of the Wagner group, but did you know that this tough-looking mercenary lord once provided catering services in the Kremlin? He used to organize Vladimir Putin's elaborate banquets. Yes, that's how he got his nickname, Putin's chef. He's the chef who cooked enough to turn into a chief of multi-million-dollar private mercenary army that Putin found very convenient to use in places where he did not want to send his actual army. And now the West appears to be pretty determined to brand the Wagner group as a terror organization. But the question is this: what was the West doing for all these years? Now, France wants the European Union to punish the Wagner group by labeling it as a terror organization and labeling the mercenaries as terrorists. On the other side of the channel, Britain is doing something similar. It is moving to blacklist the private army of the Russians. Reports say that this could be done within a span of the next few weeks. Now, here's the question: does all of this matter in any way to the Wagner group? Now, firstly, being listed on a terror group in the EU means that member states will freeze the assets of the Wagner group. Secondly, assets belonging to the group members will also be frozen as well, and European companies will be barred from dealing with the group. Which brings us back to the original question: does any of this really matter to Vladimir Putin's chef and his mercenaries? Now, time for some history. The world had first heard of the Wagner group in 2014, the same year that Russia annexed Crimea. The Wagner Group reportedly enabled that its mercenaries were some of the little green men who annexed the Crimean Peninsula. Back then, the group was led by a man called Dmitry Utkin. He was a retired military officer and reportedly an admirer of Hitler, who in turn was a fan of the German composer Richard Wagner. So Utkin named his private militia as the Wagner Group. Ironically enough, what is interesting is that its mercenaries now claim to be leading Russia's denazification mission in Ukraine. They're being accused of rape, of robberies, torture, assault and massacre. But Ukraine is not the only frontier Wagner Group operates in. You'll find that the private army is very active in Sudan at this moment, in the Central African Republic, where it controls several gold mines, in Libya, where it protects Prigozhin's investments, in Mali, and even in the Congo Basin, where it has been reportedly allocated a 30-year permit to get into timber business. The Wagner Group also operates in Syria, where it is fighting alongside the forces of President Bashar al-Assad, and also in Mozambique. So how much will the Western blacklisting actually affect Wagner's businesses? Only a question can answer this one. Now, how do you wage a war on a business that does not even exist on paper? Now, what if we told you that the Wagner Group is not even registered as a legal entity? Forget anywhere outside of Russia. Not even in Russia is the Wagner Group registered as a legal entity. So how do you ban it? The planned Western blacklisting will make it into a criminal offense to work for the Wagner Group. But the point is, there are no contracts on paper. What you have instead is plausible deniability, and also Wagner recruits come from around the world, from places far-flung such as Syria and Libya. So what good are Western sanctions in these war-torn nations? And also, as we mentioned, once banned, European businesses won't be able to deal with the Wagner Group. But the question, of course, is what they can still do is sign deals with a group that has a different name. You know, much like the KFC can still be found in Russia, it just now has a new name. It's the same fried chicken, but the company now operates with a different name. And Putin's chef is likely to follow the same recipe if it comes to that, but chances are it won't. You see, there is absolutely no doubt as to what Britain and France are doing is nothing more than an extension of the sanctions warfare. But to what end? Yevgeny Prigozhin and his group have already been sanctioned by the EU and the United Kingdom, not once but repeatedly. And yet the Wagner mercenaries continue to fight in the battlefields of Ukraine and win cities in Ukraine. In other words, Europe's blacklisting business is symbolic at best and futile, completely futile at worst. And the West, of course, knows it best. Catherine Colonna, the French foreign minister, told lawmakers on Tuesday that labeling the Wagner mercenaries as terrorists will not have any, quote-unquote, direct or supplemental effect. So what's the point then? Here's what the minister also went on to state: we should not underestimate the symbolic importance of such a designation, nor the dissuasive effect that this is likely to have on states tempted to turn to the Wagner Group. Well, I don't know when was the last time symbolism managed to win a war. Our next story is from Japan. This, of course, is the land of the rising sun. But soon this could now become a member of the NATO military alliance. NATO, that stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, believe it or not, could soon expand into the Pacific. So why do we say this? Well, because of the developments such as these. Reports say that Japan is in talks with NATO to open a liaison office. Now, you heard that right, NATO's liaison office in Tokyo, and it will be the first of its kind NATO office in Asia. And this has been confirmed from statements by two of Japan's topmost officials. So this is a statement from Yoshimasa Hayashi. He's the foreign minister of Japan. In a recent interview, he said, and I quote him here, "We are already in discussions, but no details have been finalized yet. The reason why we are discussing about this is that since the aggression by Russia and Ukraine, the world has in fact become more unstable." That's statement number one. Statement number two is from Koji Tomita, the Japanese ambassador to the United States of America at a National Press Club event in Washington. He was asked about these plans, to which he said, and I again quote him, "The point that you mentioned is one of the things that we are working on to strengthen our partnership. But I really haven't heard any final confirmation of that, but we are working in that direction." So what do you make of these statements? What is the NATO military alliance trying to say? Well, as of now, NATO has not said anything. The body has refused to confirm these reports. It has said that it can't get into details of its ongoing deliberations with its allies. But here's what the reports are saying. They claim that the NATO liaison office is due to open sometime next year in Tokyo. The aim of this liaison office would be to enable discussions with NATO security partners like South Korea, Australia and New Zealand. The question is, why is there such a need for these kind of discussions that has suddenly arisen? Apparently, it's all down to China. Its muscle flexing in the South China Sea, its military incursions into the Indo-Pacific, and also its heavy-handed attitude towards countries in these regions. Remember, China has been growing its naval and air force presence in areas near Japan. It has also laid claim to the Senkaku Islands, an uninhabited Japanese-controlled chain in East China Sea. So, in a way, by opening an office in Tokyo, NATO is in fact trying to converge strategic interests and mutual opportunities for mutual engagement in this part of the world. At least that is what the observers are saying. For Japan specifically, a NATO office on its soil offers a useful mechanism for engaging with the European governments, a single venue for discussions on security matters rather than travelling to 31 individual countries for bilateral security meetings. In a nutshell, the opening of the liaison office of the NATO military alliance on the territory of Japan will mark a significant development for the Western alliance amidst the deepening geopolitical fault lines. It is likely to attract criticism from the Chinese government, which has previously warned against such a move. So far, the criticism is restricted to the Chinese state media. Take a look at this headline. This is from Global Times and it reads, "NATO's liaison office in Japan is doomed to be pulled out like a thorn." Now, what follows are lengthy paragraphs on why such a move is likely to escalate the tensions. This is what the Chinese mouthpiece has said. The NATO liaison office in Japan is no longer a symbolic move, but a substantial move to build a so-called security defense around China. The target of its defense is China. Do not underestimate the danger of a liaison office. In the long run, NATO's entry into the Pacific is the introduction of a hostile paradigm into Asia. Doesn't this remind you of something? Isn't this exactly what Russia said on Ukraine's bid to join the NATO military alliance? Didn't Russia also accuse NATO of provoking it by getting closer towards its borders? So let's actually quote you what Vladimir Putin had said all the way back in 2007 when accused NATO of unwanted expansionism. He'd said, and I quote him here, "NATO has put its frontline forces on our borders. This expansion represents a serious provocation that reduces the level of mutual trust, and we have the right to ask, against whom is this expansion intended? And what happened to the assurances that our Western partners made after the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact?" What is interesting is that 15 years on, China is echoing pretty much the same lines as what Vladimir Putin had said way back in 2007. I'm not saying that Beijing is entirely without fault here. It does indulge in frequent provocations in its neighborhood. But the question is this: isn't NATO provoking China by planting its office in Japan? Watch this space, because the NATO expansion into the Pacific is the definition of the churning of the troubled waters in the Pacific. The politics in the United States is taking some pretty interesting turns. The former American president has yet again been caught in a legal case. Donald Trump is now liable to pay $5 million in a sexual abuse case, a case in which he was absent throughout the trial. So what about the sitting American president, Joe Biden, who's been dodging press conferences? This at a time when he's running for the top job. Will Donald Trump's recent court case affect his presidential run? And is Biden using a strategy, a deliberate strategy, to ignore the press altogether? Our next poll gets you the details.
US President from 2017 to 2021, Donald Trump has been the frontrunner in opinion polls for the Republican presidential nominations. The former president has an ability to weather controversies. Controversies that could sink other politicians. But Trump has a unique base of supporters. So let's start with what Trump is facing right now. Trump has been found guilty in a sexual abuse case, a case where he had abused E. John Carroll, a magazine writer, in the 1990s. But since this is a civil case, Trump will not face any criminal consequences, like going to jail. The former president is liable to pay $5 million to Carroll, but his lawmakers have raised an appeal. This will let Trump dodge the $5 million payment as long as the case is on appeal. So what is the case all about? It revolves around E. John Carroll, who claims that she was raped by Trump. She said that Trump forcibly touched her in a dressing room in Manhattan. Reports say Carroll did not come out to the authorities earlier because she feared that Trump would use his wealth to hush the situation. Although Trump did not testify at the trial, he was seen mistaking Carroll as his ex-wife, Marla Maples, in a deposition in 2022. He even went further and said that he could not have raped Carroll as she was not his type. Just to remind you, Trump is now guilty of sexual abuse. But the court did not find him guilty of rape.
Yeah, I mean, look, strange verdict. This was a rape claim. It was a rape case all along, and the jury rejected that, but made other findings. So we'll obviously be appealing those other findings, but they rejected her rape claim, and she'd always claimed this was a rape case. So it's a little perplexing, but, we move forward.
Now we pose the major question: does the court's verdict threaten Trump's run for presidency? Well, it seems unlikely. You see, Trump's supporters see his legal woes as efforts by opposing parties to target him. Trump has cited the Carroll trial as a Democratic plot. He said that Carroll made up the allegations to politically harm him. In Trump's previous hush money case, in which he was charged for falsifying business records, his poll numbers had actually gone up. Trump has always said that cases against him are politically motivated. The business mogul has a history of manipulating his supporters. There was a time when he wanted to remain in handcuffs during a trial. Another instance was when he said that he didn't care if he got shot by the police. All of this was to show the audience that he was being targeted by opposition parties who didn't want him to succeed. Strategists say that pro-Trump voters will not change. They will continue to stand by his side. His supporters are convinced that Trump is just a victim of unfair treatment. On the other hand, the sitting American president Joe Biden is currently facing one of the lowest approval ratings. Reports show that Biden has almost abandoned news conferences. Studies show that Biden averaged 10 news conferences in his first 2 years in office. But Trump did better in this space. He averaged over 19 news conferences during the same period. Why is Biden slipping away from news conferences? Critics say that news conferences always carry risks for politicians. Risks such as performing badly or making certain gaffes. Is Biden trying to hide something? Especially while his family faces brutal accusations on tax crimes and foreign lobbying. Reports say that Biden has not entertained any major newspaper since taking office. The White House Correspondents Association has urged the White House to return to the habit of the president regularly facing reporters in formal news conferences. Will President Biden start attending press conferences? Would Biden's approval rating witness a new rise? Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Let me ask you a question. How many of you are hoping to make a career in advertising? What kind of skill sets do you think that you'd need to get into an ad agency? Creativity, yes. You'd also need to be innovative. But if you're thinking of making ads for the Chinese market, then a racist advertisement is really not beyond the pale. Now see these men with blackened faces, they are supposed to be Indian. Now they are so Indian that they are wearing turbans and they have dark skin, or whatever you get from lathering Chinese men with coal dust. They're wearing sherwanis. Doing what? Now these funny looking men are talking to this chap, another cartoon with a black face, painted moustache and a shiny turban. And also what looks like a beach towel that's been stitched into a sherwani. This man, the one in the car, is supposed to be a hero. The three women on the back seat prove the point. The blackened-faced bikers and also the wannabe Desi driver exchange some words. Words that you won't understand unless you understand Chinese. But before you know it, they've all burst into a Bollywood jingle. Now, there's a remix of a pretty famous Punjabi song that is playing in the background, and these women have now suddenly turned into your quintessential Bollywood item girls. Racist, or is this a failed attempt at trying to ape Bollywood? No doubt the Chinese love Bollywood. They're obsessed with it. They're obsessed with Imran Khan, the piano player, the idea of freedom of thought and also of creativity. Something that China at this moment quite evidently lacks. Otherwise, how else do you explain the fact that the Chinese public security minister shamelessly lifted this video made by some rookie vloggers? The video was then shared as a part of a road safety campaign. The message was to wear a seat belt. Now, even if you're sitting in the back of the seat, and a helmet is an absolute must when you're riding a bike. Now, the question is this: did the Chinese find no better way of getting this message across instead of this tacky and what many would say is quite clearly a racist advertisement? Now, they could have done this with a fresh promotional video, some posters or road safety signs, just copy-paste from the internet, but you see it. It is Chinese where stereotyping is the best sales pitch that they've resorted to. It does not matter whether you're selling road decorum, Dior or detergent. See this photo. This is how Dior tried to lure the Chinese richy rich and to target the buyers more bothered with laundry bags than Dior bags. A Chinese detergent company put together what can only be described as one of the most racist advertisements of the century. It really is a once-in-a-lifetime kind of a disaster of an advertisement. This was a TV commercial. It used an African man who was pushed into a washing machine along with some magic Chinese detergent. And guess what the Chinese detergent does? The African man who was pushed into the washing machine comes out looking pale and visibly Chinese. So the question is this: how does China come up with this kind of mind-boggling content? Is this what appeals to the masses? Because this type of advertising, whatever it is, can only be described as quite clearly racist. Now, our next story is about the Wuhan virus, and this seems to be a virus that simply will not go away. Just days after the WHO declared that the COVID-19 pandemic is no longer a public health emergency of international concern, this deadly virus is back in the news again. And guess why? It is again spreading in China. Courtesy the Labor Day holiday, you see, travel boomed in China during the extended holiday period, and COVID infections in China have shot up since then. And now the virus has reached the financial hubs and the trading floors across China. Traders and bankers have reported a spike in the infections, with their peers and their colleagues testing positive. Listen to what the Chinese authorities have had to say on this matter.
Based on the recent monitoring result of fever clinics across the country during the Labor Day holiday, there has been a slight increase in cases, but the number of severe cases in hospital did not increase significantly, and the normal order of diagnosis and treatment in hospitals was not affected. Overall, there are still sporadic outbreaks domestically.
So this is the question that we've got for the WHO. Is the pandemic really over, or has the WHO, with just 5 days back declared that the pandemic is over, jumped the gun? Because quite clearly what is happening on the ground in China points to the fact that the pandemic and the infections still persist. And the WHO has a history of not handling the pandemic well. So let's begin right from the beginning. The WHO underestimated the number of COVID infections initially. It learned of a mysterious pneumonia outbreak in Wuhan on the 31st of December in 2019. And yet the first official discussion did not happen until the 22nd of January in 2020. It was already almost a month late. But it still waited for another 8 more days to announce COVID-19 as an international emergency. In the meantime, the number of deaths in China went from 17 to 171. The figures at that moment seemed small, but consider the rate of infections. The deaths increased by over 10 times in just 8 days. Every single day was a day lost, and it is not just us who is saying this. No, experts have the same opinion. The Independent Panel for Pandemic Preparedness and Response claims that the epidemic was preventable. But there were clear failures, there were gaps, and there were delays, and the situation just got out of hand because the WHO did not act quickly enough. The month that followed WHO's declaration was an absolute mess. Time was lost as governments failed to take the required measures. The combined response was a toxic cocktail, and WHO's reluctance to impose travel restrictions only made matters worse. Soon there was an influx of COVID patients from China into the United States and across Europe and other parts of Asia. Hospitals started piling up with patients. Countries should have been preparing their healthcare systems, but what they did instead is that they descended into a winner-takes-all scramble and started hoarding protective equipment and medicines. Shortages gripped the poorer nations as those with large stockpiles remained reluctant to declare their hand. And then came WHO's mixed recommendations. For the longest time, the WHO simply could not decide if wearing a surgical mask was crucial in preventing the spread of this virus. It insisted that face masks risk doing more harm than good. Its argument was that masks give a false sense of security and that people will touch their faces more. On the 6th of April in 2020, the organization repeated that the use of masks was of no use without social distancing. And it was not until the 5th of June that it finally made up its mind and recommended that wearing face masks in high-density areas hit hard by COVID. Let me repeat, the announcement came in the month of June, well into the 6th month of the pandemic. The question is this: what took the WHO so long to make this small judgment? Why was the WHO undecided over the mere use of face masks? Much of the criticism revolves around the WHO's slow response. It did the same when it came to scrutiny. It took the organization more than a year to even start investigating the origins of the virus. As China downplayed its COVID deaths and denied accountability for the virus, the WHO's team of experts reached Beijing in February 2021, only to be controlled and dictated by Beijing. The former American President Donald Trump slammed the organization as a puppet of Beijing. So what gives? And what explains WHO's leniency with China? And why has the organization been so slow, and why were its decisions so delayed? It seems that the WHO simply has a sense of bad timing. And now it is said that COVID-19 is no longer a global emergency at a time when there is a new wave of infection that seems to be sweeping across China. In less than 4 days from now, Turkey will be heading for its presidential and parliamentary polls. Millions of the Turkish people will be heading to the polling booths to pick their next leader, a position that has been hogged by Recep Tayyip Erdogan for the last 2 long decades. But the next 4 days could pretty much be his last, because the people of Turkey at this moment are angry, very angry. They're still grieving from the loss from the massive earthquakes that shook Turkey. They haven't forgotten as to how thousands of buildings just collapsed in front of their eyes and how they lost their loved ones, homes and everything else that they possessed. All this happened under Erdogan's watch, and the memories are raw in people's minds. Now, we've reported on this before, but for those who are unversed, Turkey has been collecting earthquake tax for over 2 decades. You heard that right. The tax has been levied since 1999. What for? For disaster prevention and the development of emergency services. So how big was this amount? Hold your heart, because the amount that has been collected as disaster tax was 88 billion Turkish lira. That's about $4.5 billion. So what did Ankara do with this money? Where was it spent? The government claims that it spent it exactly where it needed to be. In this case, the question is, if the government did spend the money where it was needed to be spent, then why did so many buildings topple like dominoes when the earthquake struck? Now, nearly 118,000 buildings either collapsed or required urgent demolition or were severely damaged by the earthquake. And this is according to the government data. Who knows if this data has been downplayed? So what kind of earthquake proofing was it that Turkey resorted to? Because it was so shoddy that when the earthquake struck, so many of these buildings just crashed, killing the people who were living inside the buildings. The government has refused to provide a record where the earthquake tax went, and by all means, the people of Turkey shouldn't even expect a record, because government spending reports have been censored in Turkey since 2012. The earthquakes have left the country in shambles, both in terms of infrastructure and economy, but they've also exposed Erdogan. They've put his government's corruption out into the open, and the people are extremely angry by the loss. And they're looking at the shortcomings of Erdogan's 2 decades in power. The president had championed religious and conservative social values in the country. He had led an increasingly authoritarian regime that was intolerant of criticism. And now, the earthquake could bring an end to his reign that has lasted for over 2 decades. Erdogan stands against 3 rivals. His main challenger is Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, also known as the Turkish Gandhi, a title that he earned because of his striking resemblance to Mahatma Gandhi. He leads the coalition of 6 opposition parties of the Nations Alliance. Kılıçdaroğlu defines himself as a Democrat and promises to return to a strong parliamentary system of governance. He's famous for his anti-corruption rhetoric, which is something that Turkey at this moment now really wants, considering Erdogan's track record. There's also Muharrem İnce, the Homeland Party candidate, without any backing from an alliance. And lastly, there is Sinan Ogan, an ally of Erdogan-led AK party. Now, at this moment as we speak, Kılıçdaroğlu is leading the opinion polls with about 48.9% of the voters favouring him. Erdogan is still behind him with 43.2% of the voters. İnce and Ogan lag far behind with just 4.8 and 3.1% of the votes likely to go to them. What happens if Kılıçdaroğlu wins? Now, what are his promises? For starters, unlike Erdogan's conservative regime, Kılıçdaroğlu promises to reinstate parliamentary system of governance. He's also vowed to solve the Kurdish issue and to send the Syrian refugees back home. But the 74-year-old faces criticism of being very close to the EU and the West. That this is going to be a tight race between Kılıçdaroğlu and Erdogan. Political analysts say that if Kılıçdaroğlu wins, then Turkey could be democratic once again, and it could pursue a membership in the European Union and could be better aligned with the NATO allies. But the question is this: will this really happen? Does this kind of political posturing even have an appeal with the Turkish masses? Is Erdogan's time finally up after 20 years? At this moment, it is difficult to predict, but the odds, the way they stack up, do not appear to be in favor of Erdogan. So that's all the time we have in this edition of Gravitas. We'll leave you with Gravitas images. Have a good night.
Show me love, show me love.
WION. Now
Gravitas tells you stories which others won't. And tonight we will tell you about this new strategic map that is being drawn.
They say your enemy's enemy is your friend. Is that the foundation of the new defense bridge between India and America?
This is what